This is Ball on Blast, part of the On Blast Podcast Network, available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you like it, then subscribe and tell your friends. Holla.
Thank you. You're far too kind for tuning in once again to another edition of a little thing we like to call the Ball on Blast podcast. My name is Sheldon and Andrew. I got my voice back, and I'm joined by my guy, Andrew Webster. Webby, what is good?
Oh, Shelly, I'm glad you're feeling better because we are less than a week away from actual NBA basketball. Oh, man.
Right.
I'm fired up. Not only am I fired up about that, but my Philadelphia Eagles are currently administering an ass-kicking of division rivals up there in New York. So I'm very happy. I got basketball to look forward to. We're in football. It's really the best time of year, right?
Best time of year, especially when you got the Leafs doing what the Leafs are doing right now, too. Sports is just amazing.
We have to touch on the young god, Austin. He scored again today. Huh? He's got 8 now.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Sports is the best. It's so good. It's so fun. But there's no sport that is like the NBA, right? The NBA, no matter what we think, whenever we think, there's a bit of a lull, we're waiting for games to start.
Or we've seen all that we were going to see in the off season.
Yeah, right when we think that, like the NBA, I think we've discussed this premise before on the podcast, and I think it was coined by Bill Simmons, the Tyson zone.
Right, or the Trump zone.
Well, yes, probably renamed the Trump zone. But basically it stands for any headline could come up about said person, and you would believe it. That was the Tyson zone, right? So you could hear, like, Tyson fought off 30 people in a bar brawl. You'd believe it, right? Like, no matter what the headline is. I feel like the NBA has hit that Tyson zone because there's nothing that surprises me. I just start laughing when things happen. And, of course, the latest thing is this Jimmy Butler saga that won't end, but just keeps getting better and better and better.
Like you love to say about Meek Mill. What does he say?
There's levels to this shit.
This shit. Yeah, man.
There's levels to this shit. Meek Millie. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start here, okay? Woj, who we all know is the king of the NBA. So Woj started off in the morning tweeting off, after talks fell apart over the weekend, Miami still pursuing discussions with Minnesota on a Jimmy Butler trade. Butler has been in the TWolves locker room with teammates this morning before practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll join them on the floor. I saw that tweet and walked into our morning meeting, and I was just like, guys, so Woj says Jimmy Butler's in the locker room. Like, what is happening?
Throwing rocks at people.
Yeah, it's like, what? So we know that they were close on making the trade with Miami, and then at the last second, something hit a snag, and the deal fell apart, right? So I guess now Jimmy Butler came up with this plan because what followed next in this sequence of tweets from Woj, stop me at any point, Webby, okay? Next tweet, Jimmy Butler practiced with the Timberwolves today, league sources tell ESPN. Next tweet from Woj, All-Star Jimmy Butler participated in Minnesota's practice, a session that included him verbally challenging teammates, coaches, and front office, league sources told ESPN. Butler was emotional at times, targeting Thibodeau, Layden, Towns, Wiggins. Story coming soon. At one point, this is another tweet, at one point in a scrimmage, sources said, Butler turned to GM Scott Layden and screamed, "You bleeping need me. You can't win without me," close quote. Butler left teammates and coaches largely speechless. He dominated the gym in every way. Jimmy is back. At this point, because there's more to this saga, but at this point, Webby, what were you thinking?
I was thinking that Jimmy is off his meds, and I just pictured him in like a gown, like a medical gown, out there playing scrimmage against the T-Wolves. No. The real thing that I thought was like the look on Wiggins and Towns' face when they were, like getting ready to practice. The doors swinging open and it's Jimmy, and they're just like, oh shit, I thought we were through with this guy.
Exactly, right? It's so crazy. And you mentioned Wiggins and Towns, and it wasn't that long ago. We discussed it on this podcast. You had Andrew Wiggins in on Twitter talking about keep that same energy to Jimmy Butler,
Yeah,
right? And like that wasn't that long ago. So I can't even imagine what it would have been like to see him just in the locker room. And then, because we got all this stuff from Chris Haynes, right?
Yeah.
And Chris Haynes had a bunch of other details. And again, Webby, we did this one time before, right? Where we did like a 5-star rating, 5 being the highest. I'm going to read a bunch of tidbits from Chris Haynes here. You tell me where this ranks on the scale of 1 to 5, okay? 5 being the highest, okay?
Okay.
Here's the first tidbit. Quote, I ain't never seen some shit like that. Jimbo showed out. Close quote. One of Minnesota's players told Yahoo Sports. Okay.
That's
Second tidbit. Butler showed up to practice late and just subbed himself into the scrimmage on the third team to go against the starting group.
5.
League sources said.
5. Strong 5. Third team.
Now,
third team. It's my favorite.
Who's on the third team?
Oh.
Like, I don't know who are the dudes that are on the third team.
End of the bench for the TWolves? I have no idea. But,
that's amazing.
What do they play on NBA on TNT? What is it?
Oh, who he played
Who
for?
he played
Yes.
For? Yeah.
Well played. Well played. Next tidbit. Screaming from the top of his lungs, Butler uttered taunts at his teammates such as, they ain't shit and they soft, league sources said.
Easy 5. Easy 5.
All right, next one. At one point, Butler found himself guarding Towns in the post, and when the big man received the entry pass, Butler yelled, quote, he can't do shit against me, and Towns ended up kicking the ball out, league sources said.
5. And it's that last bit that really I love.
How does that happen?
He wasn't ready for it. He wasn't ready for the
Dude
slow.
is yelling, these guys are soft. Dude's yelling all this stuff. Towns, you get the ball. You got to go at him, even if you miss. You got to, like, old school ball him and, like, bully ball him, no?
Please tell me you've got the... Do you have another tweet in
Oh,
there?
I'm still going. Don't worry. I'm still coming.
There's one that's my favorite.
So, neither Towns nor Wiggins confronted Butler at any point, right? When practice concluded, Butler stormed out of the facility without stretching with the rest of his teammates. However, before he departed, Wiggins gave him a hand dap?
Nah. It's 2. It's 2.
What happened to keep that same energy?
Mad soft.
What?
Mad soft. Well, listen, he is Canadian. I'm sure he apologized.
True. He's a nice, good old Canadian boy, right?
Canadian boy, good Ontario boy.
And then Towns huddled up the players with a message centered on everyone keeping their emotions in check, league sources said. But according to some of the players, the message was empty.
Oh, so I want to be there for it. It's so great. Just that moment in itself, that's my favorite. It's that after all this shit goes down, Jimmy Butler, crazier than a shithouse rat, coming in there, just going, basically having, I don't know, like what kind of performance you put this up with. You know, it's like Kanye at the Pablo tour. You know, it's just like he's just absolutely insane. And then you try, like, anybody. Can anybody, like, save this team, bring it together? Towns just tries and it falls flat. It's so great.
It's so great on so many levels. As you said, there's levels to this shit, right? And then, so as we piece the story together, we figure out that this was really a master plan by Jimmy Butler and his camp, right?
We call it a publicity stunt where I come from.
Exactly. He wanted to get traded. Things stalled. So now he's going to make a scene. He calls up Rachel Nichols, which, shout out to Rachel Nichols, by the way.
Who is, like, not quietly, like, noisily becoming, like, the premier NBA journalist.
Oh, no. She's a champ of the NBA.
Absolutely.
Like, LeBron needs something, he calls Rachel Nichols. Like, whoever it is, you call Rachel Nichols. Rachel Nichols is a champ of the NBA. That goes without saying, right? So he calls up Rachel Nichols, basically tells her, hey, you probably want to come to Minnesota. I'm ready to talk. Let's do an interview tomorrow. So then he sets all this up, shows up to practice, knows that he's going to do this, hijacks the practice, then sits down with Mrs. Rachel Nichols to talk about it. And, like, now you know that's going to be splashed all over the internet, all over ESPN. It's all over all of the shows. And now you're basically, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, right, Webby? NBA players are the best at creating their own narratives. Jimmy Butler just created his own narrative, his own movie, his own, like, everything, right? Like, that was incredible. Did you catch much of the interview?
I caught just the parts that were just kind of...
The key parts.
Yeah, that were tweeted out. very gifable moments from my boy Jimmy Butler. Now, while I agree completely with you that, and I was talking about this with a couple of guys at work, this was completely premeditated.
For sure.
He knew what he was doing, and almost after you kind of see that interview and then go back and read those tweets, you can tell that Jimmy's kind of laying it on thick a little bit. I'm sure that he, a lot of histrionics, maybe, acting it up a bit. But honestly, man, I think that it's way deeper than that. There are levels to this shit. Sure, this is a great publicity stunt, but I think that Jimmy knows that the trade's not happening. I think he can read the writing on the wall. The second go around by Miami falling through, he sees that no team is going to trade for him right now. So you know what he's done? And these were my favorite tweets afterwards, were the other veteran players that weren't named that are saying, wow, he's got a lot of this team now behind him for what he came in and did, rather than slinking away.
Here's the thing, right? Like, he's coming in to try to prove a point. His whole thing is that Wiggins and Towns are soft. And he said so much in the interview with Rachel Nichols, right? Like, this is not hyperbole. I don't think I'm I'm going crazy connecting dots here. I think the narrative that Jimmy Butler is spinning here is that Wiggins and Towns are soft. And if they're really going to get to the next level, he's the one that makes them go, right? Because he's the one that's out there busting his ass. And again, shout out to our people that listen to us on the Ball on Blast podcast, because I'm pretty sure a couple podcasts ago, Webby, we were discussing the fact of the different upbringings of Jimmy Butler and Towns and Wiggins, right? Jimmy Butler's a guy that had to grind for every inch that he got in the game of basketball, to not being highly recruited in college, to being not a high pick in the NBA, whereas Towns and Wiggins, highly recruited, highly favored, both top picks in the NBA draft, right? Exactly. And that just comes with a different experience, right? So you're seeing all this now, because there are some things he said in that Rachel Nichols interview where he said, I think, who's the most talented person on the team? It's Towns, right? Who has the most like God-given abilities? I think that's the term he used. He's like, that's Wiggs, right? But he's the one that Jimmy is the one that makes it go.
Yeah, he said
he's not wrong. No. Like, is he wrong?
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Correct on all 3 points.
Well, those are the complaints we're hearing, right? Because even, who was it? I think it was Shams, but someone had this nugget when Wiggins re-signed, and he had to get a verbal commitment. The owner, before he signed the contract, had to get a verbal commitment from Wiggins that he would commit to giving more effort.
That's some grade school shit. That's some middle school shit right there. It's like, that's the thing, and like, this is why I'm totally on Jimmy Butler's side with this. It's like, when you are almost in babysitting these kids. I mean, Towns and Wiggins can't be much older than 20, 21 years old. Like, they haven't matured yet, and I understand being frustrated in that situation with those kinds of players. Like, that's not, Jimmy Butler's here to win basketball games, not to help these kids mature, right? And sure,
for sure.
Honestly, though, but it sounds like Jimmy wants to put that on his back. It doesn't sound like he wants to run away from this problem. And especially if he's not going to get traded. I mean, he put out the trade request. It fell through. And it seems to me like this was a little bit of him saying, well, this is my lot in life. This is what I've got to be doing. Ooh, that's going to be a touchdown.
Well, you're right? Like, Wiggins is 23, Towns is 22. These guys are super young. And the other part to this, right, that I think a lot of people are missing is this is Jimmy Butler coming in, and he's doing a huge dick swinging contest here, right? But he's coming in and he's saying, listen, you gave the money, like, as your organization, you guys gave the money to these two kids, and you don't want to give me the max money, but I'm the one that makes this actually go. Right. And I think that that's the part that people are missing as well. A lot of this. And yes, he's talking about he's not getting the super max from the team because they can't afford to obviously max out Wiggins, max out Towns, and give him the super max. That's not going to work. But he's quick to say that it's not even so much about the money, but the principle of, okay, you're going to make him take less, but these other two guys, you're going to max them out already. When again, Jimmy is clearly the one that makes this go.
Yeah, no.
I think that part can't be underlined enough. Right?
You're absolutely right. Now, one more thing before, like we kind of move on or whatever. But the other great part about this story is the Mark Wahlberg thing.
So I saw the headline, but I didn't really click on the story. What is that? I saw that like the headline of Mark Wahlberg's to blame.
So I forget who it was, but there was somebody who's like close to Jimmy Butler's camp, and the idea was that that Jimmy Butler was a very down to earth, humble kind of cat for the first few years he was in the league, and then he started to get good and he started to make more famous friends. And the one friend that he made before his like ego started to get the best of him, by this account, was Mark Wahlberg. And this person was saying that as soon as Jimmy Butler met Mark Wahlberg and they became friends, Mark Wahlberg put something into his head and Jimmy Butler was a different person.
What?
I know.
That is amazing.
It's so great. I mean,
that is wow.
And I've seen pictures with Jimmy Butler and Mark Wahlberg hanging out.
Yeah. That is incredible. Imagine if like the demise of the Minnesota Timberwolves is because of Mark Wahlberg. That's incredible. But again, right as you think this story couldn't get any crazier, right? Where you have a star player basically coming in to diss the other team's stars to try to force a trade out of town. Today, Shams tweets out, Timberwolves All-Star Jimmy Butler called a players-only meeting today. Side note, today's news began with the Timberwolves canceling practice. Obviously, one would assume because they didn't want the media around and they didn't want to do any media today. So somehow Shams tweets out, Timberwolves All-Star Jimmy Butler called a players-only meeting today, airing his feelings towards the situation and management per league sources.
It's like Festivus.
Butler expressed to the players he would compete with them as signs pointing to him staying with the franchise into the regular season. To which Jeff Teague, starting point guard of said Minnesota Timberwolves, goes to Twitter and @s Shams and says, it wasn't no players-only meeting. You just made that up, bro. Y'all gotta relax with this fake news.
Too good.
Webby, there's nothing better than the sarcastic bro.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true.
When you're calling someone bro sarcastically, there's nothing better than that. I love the NBA so much. That is incredible.
Good one, bro.
Cool story, bro.
You mad, bro? Oh, my
God. It's so good. The NBA is the best, but I'm going to ask you, Webby, how does this end? Like, there's no way Butler actually like comes back and 100%. Plays with them, right?
Yeah, Butler stays on the Timberwolves. They can't trade him before the season starts, and they get off to an incredible start. They start the season like 10-1. Jimmy Butler, Towns and Wiggins both come out like the fucking house is on fire. Jimmy is the straw that stirs the drink, and
should they keep him? Is that what you're saying? You think they should keep him?
Yeah, I do think they should keep him. That's what I was saying last time, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't get rid of this guy.
That is true. I hear you. And
you know what? We love this in sports, too, this tough love concept. And honestly, we just talked about Wiggins and Towns. What do they need? They need a player like Butler.
I heard a really good concept. I was listening to the Ringer podcast. Shout out to the Ringer. I think a lot of shit they do at the Ringer is hella dope. There's a good point that someone made on, I think it's their Heat Check podcast, but they're saying people's perception of what happened with this Jimmy Butler situation is so dependent upon if you ever played team sports growing up.
Right.
And if you didn't play team sports growing up, you don't really understand what Jimmy Butler just did. Right? And you're kind of like, oh, fuck this guy. What's this guy doing? You know what I mean?
No.
But if you did play team sports, you're kind of like, this is awesome. This is amazing, right?
Are you kidding me? Exactly. Like, I've wanted people to do that on my team while I was playing team sports.
Right? Because there's both sides of it. You've played with people who are like Jimmy Butler, and you've played with people who can be as frustrating as Towns and Wiggins, right?
Exactly.
It's so interesting. And so my next question would be, if you were, like, let's take your Sixers, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Or just any other team. Would you want to trade for Jimmy Butler still, or would you kind of be scared away because these are kind of the antics that he's pulling off in Minnesota?
No, I think that every team would be better with Jimmy Butler, not only on the court, but in their locker room. It's the kind of guy. It's the kind of guy that I want.
I wholeheartedly agree, Webby. Sign me up. Sign me up for Jimmy Butler. Give me 5 Jimmy Butlers on my squad. Let's go. I'll go to war with them, with Jimmy Butler, any day of the week, twice on Sunday. Is that the line? Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
Let's go. This story is incredible. I don't know where it's going to end, but again, it's in the Tyson zone, so whatever happens tomorrow, who knows, right? Think about this. We're talking about Jeff Teague. I don't even know if I've heard Jeff Teague ever talk. Going on Twitter to tell a reporter, bro, you made that up, and call it fake news. The NBA is really the best. It's so good. Good.
It's fan-fucking-tastic.
But yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, let us know what you guys think of this Jimmy Butler saga. Should Minnesota keep Jimmy Butler? If you're a fan of another team, would you want Jimmy Butler on your team? Let us know what you think, as always. Hit us up on the socials, in the comment section of wherever you listen to this podcast. We want to hear from you. And something else we want to hear from you about, especially Raptors fans. Ooh. Raptors preseason has basically come to an end, right? They had one more game, I think, tonight, as in Thursday night.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure most of the regulars aren't playing, right? So basically, preseason ended on Wednesday night in Montreal. There's a lot to digest. Kawhi didn't really shoot well, but he did everything else. He had 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He's a defensive beast. We know that. Danny Green was splashing threes from all over the place. Your boy Kyle Lowry got ejected.
Yeah.
Your boy Kyle Lowry was doing Kyle Lowry things. Mr. Webby, what was your biggest takeaway from either last night's game in Montreal or just in general about the Toronto Raptors coming out of this preseason?
How seamless the transition is to these two new faces on the Raptors in Kawhi and Danny Green. And how Nick Nurse has, and I know it's still the preseason, but how he's kind of brought them into the lineup and what he wants their roles to be. Oh, Carson going deep. Oh, that's a flag. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. What's the score, by the way?
It is 21-6. Good guys.
21-6. Okay.
So I know what I'm really impressed with is how Nick Nurse has amalgamated these two new pieces into the lineup and how it's going to look. I mean, if this looks similar to what they're going to put out there in the regular season, and these are the roles that these two players are going to make, or two roles these players are going to play, I mean, it looks really good for the Raptors. I'm sure most fans out there just want to get the season started to see if this is going to be as good as advertised. Now, I did like it was vintage angry Kyle night in that last one. I think he started off like 0 for 4 with 4 turnovers and then got himself ejected. Now, obviously, hopefully that Kyle doesn't bring that kind of performance to the regular season, but I hope he brings that passion. And you know how excited I am for really old school, angry, petulant Kyle Lowry. And if he can be the tough guy on this team, if he can really be the guy who brings that edge to the Raptors this season,
kind of bully nature.
I really think that would be awesome to see. And I think maybe he doesn't have the biggest year in terms of numbers, but we talked about Jimmy Butler in the locker room, and I don't think that Kyle Lowry is going to let any kind of bullshit happen with any young players or any new players that are in that share that locker room with him. I don't think he'd have to worry about a guy like Kawhi or Danny Green, but for more of the younger players, like, he's going to be a great person to learn from.
Kyle Lowry, though, it's super interesting, right? And a lot of people were talking about, we saw a lot of the beat writers talking about Kyle being Kyle, or, curmudgeon Kyle is back. I call it
Master's hat Kyle.
Well played. I just kind of think Kyle's Kyle, right? And so he's going to argue with refs because that's just what he does, right? In every game. And I don't think he has an off switch. So he's going to drive. He's going to try to get a call, or a call gets made against him, and he's then going to just harass and try to bully that referee. That's just what Kyle Lowry's going to do. And at a certain point, he gets ejected, whatever. We saw Steve Kerr do the same thing, whereas I know Steve Kerr's your boy, but Steve Kerr blatantly said, I don't really want to be here anyways.
Why is Steve Kerr my boy?
Oh, just because while I continue to hate on the Warriors and the fact that Steve Kerr is not a good coach, because anyone could coach the Warriors.
Listen, was Phil Jackson a good coach?
Yes.
Okay, then Steve Kerr's a good coach.
The Warriors are not. The Warriors are more stacked than
100%, 100%. But they've won multiple championships.
That's fair. That is fair. But, I mean, like, sticking with the Lowry thing, I'm not bothered by it because I feel like Kyle's going to do this in the regular season. Like, this is just Kyle Lowry, and he kind of got to take the good with the bad. And I think a fired-up Kyle Lowry, the reason why I don't think this will blow up is because there's Fred Van. First off, the Raptors are going to be good. So Kyle has no choice but to play ball because they don't really, like, they need him, but they don't need him. You know what I mean? Like, if shit hits a fan, you're plugging in Freddie, who's ready to go anyways, and then you still have DeLon.
Yeah.
And
although the DeLon injury, that wasn't
true. But we know the monster that this Raptors bench can be, and you mentioned your biggest takeaway so far is how seamless the transition's been. Kawhi looks great, and him being healthy is a massive factor. And you know what's funny? So both on Tim and Sid today, it was funny. They were talking about, has there been a shift in the narrative from the fan base? Like the fan base seems to be really fired up, whereas you go back a couple months ago and people were all rattled that they traded DeRozan. Right? Now you fast forward and people seem to be fired up. And, you know, it's funny because I got a text from a friend, and it was one of my friends who was super salty about the trade. Like, super salty, nonstop, so angry. And last night I got a text message and just said, "Oh, my favorite number is number 2, by the way." And I'm like, what? I'm like, I thought it was number 10. It's like, no, it's really number 2. So it's kind of weird because Kawhi has, like, my number now. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm not letting you off the hook. You're talking all greasy, right? And it's funny because I feel like it represents the fan base in terms of what's going on with the fan base right now, right? And have you kind of noticed that narrative kind of shift now that we're actually seeing Kawhi in uniform and seeing I know it's preseason, but still just what this team can look like a glimpse into what this team can look like.
And I think that it was sure seeing a healthy Kawhi, finding out that he was healthy, that this calf problem doesn't seem to be affecting him this year. But I also think it's the coverage of what the Raptors are going to look like from not just the Canadian media, but the American, international, NBA coverage as well. Getting legitimized by having others say that your team is going to finish in the top 2, top 3 of the conference will go a lot to convince the fan base that this was a good idea to make. And it's almost like these Raptors fans are waking up to the fact that, yeah, you know what? We do have a top 5 player in the NBA on our team. And we are in a weaker conference now that LeBron is gone. And if a couple things go right, we could be in the conference finals and maybe even beat a Boston or a Philadelphia to get to the finals. We've got the right player to do it, and we've got the right system there. We're deep. We're everything that you want a finals contender to be. And it just seemed like it took a couple of months for the Raptors fans to kind of wake up and smell those roses.
Yeah, and realize that, hey, your squad was already nice. You just swapped out an all-star for an MVP candidate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, and on top of that, the other part that I think people are going to be surprised about, right? Because I don't think people really watch San Antonio games like front to back like that. Maybe when they're winning championships, cool, but I don't think people fully know how good Kawhi Leonard is. Right. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I definitely don't think people understood how good Danny Green was. And that was a thing that we talked about right away when this trade went down, Webby. We both said, let's not forget about the fact you're adding a whole other starter to your team as well.
Not only a starter, but a guy who fits in so well with what every NBA team is trying to get done. And a guy who can fit into your system really well. A guy that almost you were missing.
Right? Like, you're talking about shooting threes and playing defense, and that's exactly what Danny Green's going to come in and do. And he's a vet with championship pedigree. Like, let's remove I know this might sound crazy, but follow me. Let's just say you still had DeMar and you added in Danny Green. That would have been such a massive pickup for this team. Do you know what I mean? So now you combine that with Kawhi, and it's like, people, don't sleep on Danny Green. He's a key addition to this team. And it's going to be so fun to watch. So glad to see where this Raptors team might go. And the one pause. I'm gonna ask you this to close out this segment here, Webby. Should Raptors fans really be this hype, or should we kind of chill a little bit because it's only the preseason?
No, honestly, this is the best shot that the Toronto Raptors have to make the finals in their history.
I agree, man. I totally
I mean, I know that's kind of crazy to say, but there's no LeBron in this conference anymore, and you've got an MVP candidate on your team. I mean, this
sure.
this is a great opportunity. If you're going to do it, you may as well do it now, right?
For sure. And we'll get a little bit more into the Eastern Conference Finals a little later. We'll do some predictions here for the regular season coming up. But just again, Toronto Raptors season gets underway on Wednesday at home against the Cavs. Friday they play Boston, and then Saturday they're in Washington. So right away, we'll get to know a lot about this Toronto Raptors team.
That Boston game on Friday is going to be great.
Woo! Gonna be lit. And also, just a warning, people, On Blast listeners, there might be something in the works, details to come. Stay tuned. But just letting you know, just throwing that out there, tossing that out there.
Well, you can always follow us whenever there's NBA games going on, because I'm sure we'll be watching.
For sure. Totally. Can't wait for the season to start. And Webby, I'm sure you can't wait for your Sixers. So you know what? I blocked out some time here,
I appreciate
Webby.
it.
I just want you to tell me what's going on with the Sixers. What's going on with your squad?
Okay, so there's a couple of things this year. We talked about the Raptors, this being their best chance to make the NBA Finals in franchise history. This has got to be the Sixers' best chance to make the NBA Finals since they had one Allen Iverson on their team. And they actually did make the NBA Finals. Now, for a lot of years leading up here in this trust the process, some of the best Philly Sixers highlights that I've seen have been on Instagram. And that includes Joel Embiid windmill dunking and Ben Simmons playing pickup games in Australia. And this offseason has been very much the same. I'm really happy to have social media here to watch the progression of guys like Simmons, of guys like Markelle Fultz as they get ready for this really important season. Now, a lot of people out there in the offseason were a little disappointed that the Sixers didn't make a big splash. I think the only big name that they really added to their team was Wilson Chandler. And that doesn't really necessarily that's not really necessarily the biggest, sexiest pick up in the off season. But you know what? Like I'll bring you back to something that Joel Embiid said back in August. And I read this today, actually. I didn't even read it when he said it in August. But this is the attitude of the Sixers right now heading into the season. So this was Embiid telling reporters, when my season ended, there was a lot of talk about adding guys. I literally did not really care because I want to get better. I want to be better than those guys that were mentioned if I'm not already better than them. That was my message. Just going into the offseason, finally the first one healthy and able to do whatever I want. That was my goal regardless. So I love that Embiid is taking, not a woe is me, woe is us mentality into this season about not landing any free agents. He knows that this team is good enough to get to the NBA Finals. So I'm ready for the Sixers. Again, it's going to come down to health. If Simmons and Embiid and TJ McConnell can stay healthy, they're going to be
TJ McConnell.
I love my TJ McConnell. But honestly, if those two guys can stay healthy for 65, 70 games, the sky's the limit for the Sixers, man.
Yo, man, I'll be honest with you. I love that talk. I love that mentality from Joel Embiid that not that we don't need LeBron, but I don't necessarily want LeBron because I'm trying to beat LeBron. I love that mentality.
Yeah, that's
I
big.
think that's great. And Ben Simmons just has the way that Ben Simmons carries himself on the court.
It's so cool.
Yeah, I like it a lot. There's something about him, and I hate the term swagger. I feel like that's been beaten to death maybe 5 years ago. But there's just an aura about him. The way that he carries himself on the court, he's not backing down from anybody. He's not afraid of anybody. He wants to guard up on anybody. He'll try to take anyone to the block. The Sixers team is super interesting. And again, the only issues or worries that people are going to have are, can these guys stay healthy? That's it, right? Other than that, I mean, the Sixers are one of the teams that you want to watch night in, night out because they are super excited. They play a great style of play. They have great depth. A guy like Saric doesn't get any headlines at all. He's so good.
Here at Ball on Blast, we're big Saric fans. You got to be. He does everything right, and it never looks like it's going to work.
Are you cool with Elton Brand?
You know what? I am cool with Elton Brand. I'm cool. Listen, we're Maple Leafs fans. The Toronto Maple Leafs made a big splash in hiring a young lad named Kyle Dubas to be their general manager.
Yes.
And I really think that, you know what, if you want to make some change, if you want to be an outlier in this NBA system, sometimes you have to think outside the box. And I really like Elton Brand, and it's going to be interesting to see what he can do as the season goes on, if there are team needs that the Sixers have, if he can get it done. But I don't mind the hire at all. I mean, it's better than not having anybody there, which it looked like it was going to be for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it at all. I would assume that obviously he's done a good job since he's been in the front office. And truth be told, I wouldn't have, if you had told me that he was still like the 14th man on
you
their
would have
bench.
believed. I think he was last year.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, I definitely would have believed that. So, you know, obviously that means that he has some insight, some real insight into the team and the inner workings of the team and the coach and the players and stars, all that. So
here's the other thing.
I mean, where it's a matter of experience, and they'll put people around him that have experience, right?
You know where he went to school?
To Duke.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. It's not like hiring Jawan Howard to be your general manager or somebody who went to like a crappy state school, man. Elton Brand went to Duke.
Every time I think about Elton Brand and Duke, I think of this one story. And while you were just talking, Webby, in my head, I was like, "Can I tell this story? Can I tell this story?" And then I'm like, "Of course I can tell this story." So, before I worked at Sportsnet, obviously worked at the Score, where me and Webby both worked at the Score. The Score is a place now where you look across the media landscape and you have alumni like Bomani Jones, Renee Young, the starters. Renee Young. I can't believe I actually just called her Renee.
Renee Young.
Renee Paquette.
Say her name,
right?
Renee
I can't believe
Paquette.
I actually just called her Renee Young. That's weird. But my point is, you see the starters. Shout out to them. There's a lot of people all over the media landscape now that worked at one point, passed through the Score. Not to mention the Elliot Friedmans of the world.
Oh my God, Tim and
and all those
Sid.
people,
Yeah,
right?
man.
So many people passed through the Score. Cabby, like
Bobcat?
amazing,
Didn't Bobcat
talented.
pass through the Score?
I don't think so. Oh, he's been the fan for life.
Forever?
For life, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, like one of the most talented people I got the chance to work with was Adnan Virk, okay? And I always tell this story to try to explain to people just not only how talented he is, but how smart this guy is, right? So at one point I was working on our NBA show, and I think Virk was down there maybe hosting like the Raptors pregame or whatever, and I was scheduled to do an interview with Elton Brand. So it wasn't going to be on camera. I was just going to ask him questions and then put the story together after, right? So turning the corner, walking out of the media room, and I bump into Virk. And Virk's like, "Hey, Shelly, what's going on? What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just about to go interview Elton Brand, like just for court surfing or whatever the show was at the time." And Virk's like, "Oh, who's doing it? Like, do you want me to do it?" I'm like, "Can you? Like, do you have time?" And he's like, Yeah, I can do it. No problem. And so I give Virk the questions that I had, okay?
Yeah.
And we walked maybe 20 feet, and I'm not exaggerating, 20 feet. Virk looks at the piece of paper. Elton Brand's at the end of the 20-foot mark. So as me and Virk are walking towards Elton Brand, Virk literally looks down at the paper. He's like, "Okay, yep, Duke, drafted, Sixers, blah, 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 blah. Okay, yep, cool." I'm like, "You good?" He's like, yeah, I got it." Grabs the mic, says, "Hey, Elton Brand, what's going on? How you doing, man? Hey, I'm Adnan from the Score." He's like, looks at the camera guy. He's like, "You ready?" Camera guy's like, "Yep." Turns on the camera. He's like, "I'm Adnan Virk here with the right brand, Elton Brand," and just goes into the spiel and knocks off every single question. And I'm like, how did he just do that? Right? Like, it was literally 30 seconds that this all came together in, and he seen him walk down and just went boom, 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 knocked off every question, like, was perfect. Obviously, like, is entertaining once the camera lights came on. But I was
dropped
just
in like 6 movie references.
Right? It was honestly so amazing. And even me telling the story poorly doesn't fully emphasize just how crazy it was to turn the corner, be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, interviewing Elton Brand." "Cool. Let me read the questions in 25 seconds. "Yep. Cool. Here we are. Camera guy ready? Yep. Got the mic. Let's go." What?
He is a legend, Adnan Virk, and still one of the people who I'm so happy. Obviously, I'm watching a ton of college football every Saturday, and it's so great having Adnan come in. They'll be like, "Ooh, we got a big score in Alabama," or "We're going to Adnan at half." And I always tweet him out, and I'm like, "Virky, it's so great spending Saturdays with you again."
Right? It's so crazy. And the reason I had to bring that up, because every time I think of Elton Brand, I will always think of that story. And you said Elton Brand and Duke. Like, I always go back to Verk reading the questions and being like, okay, yep, Duke, yep, getting drafted. Elton Brand, yep, okay, cool, got it.
Just a
no
pro.
matter what, every time I think of Brand, I think of that story. So yeah, I had to take some time for that. But yeah, shout out to the Sixers. Elton Brand leading them into the next station of the process, the next faction of the process.
Next step of the process, for sure. Listen, you got to trust it. That's all you got to do.
Simple enough, right? So, you know what? Another thing we wanted to do, Webby, wanted to kind of rifle through some awards. Not all, because, like, who really cares about Coach of the Year?
Exactly. You don't want to do executive? You don't want to do executive of the year?
Not really, but we'll kind of pick and choose some things and, like, let's try to make some predictions for the season. And one of the places to start that's always fun is Rookie of the Year. So, Webby, I'll start with you. Who do you think will win Rookie of the Year this year?
Well, listen, it's tough. I'd love to give you a cool off-the-board pick, but honestly, because of the team that he's playing on, because I think that they're actually going to be kind of better than a lot of people expect, and because I think that he's going to have the media, especially our NBA blogger friends behind him, and because he's a little doughy, or maybe just white, I'm going to go Luka Doncic. I'm really excited to watch him play. Like I say, I think that having him and Dennis Smith Jr. on the same team with DeAndre Jordan, I don't know. Listen, Luka Doncic certainly won't be bringing Lob City to Dallas, but I'm really excited to watch that kid's skills and how they transition into the NBA. And I think that if he has any success at all and puts up any kind of consistent numbers, then he's not only going to be a good Rookie of the Year candidate, but I think he might be one of the top Euro guys in the league.
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, obviously it's a fun pick, right? It's a popular pick, Luka Doncic, and people are super excited. Obviously, as you mentioned, he was playing against men, and we've seen him do that. So it's interesting to see how that will transition into the NBA. But I'm going a little different here, Webby, and I will say the reasoning for my pick is a little different because most often than not, the person that wins Rookie of the Year is just a rookie who's on a team that gets a lot of minutes, and the team might not be good, but that rookie will be able to put up numbers. And so I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks, Trey Burke.
Ooh, wait, because you saw the game winner that he hit against the Spurs last night?
So here's the thing. First off, the game winner is absolutely ridiculous, right?
From half
but it
court.
kind of does fit into my narrative as to why this is a thing, okay? He'll have the keys to an offense in which he can do whatever he wants, right? Lloyd Pierce is their new coach. Lloyd Pierce is a guy who he's coached around.
Whose name I have never heard.
Different places. Well, follow me for a second.
Okay.
Here. He's been assistant coach at a bunch of different places, worked in player development, actually played at Santa Clara with Steve Nash.
Oh.
There's some Canadian ties, just a little interesting little tidbit there. But also, Lloyd Pierce had some time in Golden State. He and the new GM of the Atlanta Hawks both actually came from Golden State. And their whole game plan is to kind of create a Golden State light in the Atlanta Hawks. And you know what? They're putting Trey Burke in the Steph Curry role. So if you're telling me, and it's funny, right?
What is the Steph Curry role?
The Steph Curry role where you just jack up shots anytime you want. just like exactly what you're talking about last night. Now, is he Steph Curry? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what this means is that he will be getting a lot of shots in an offense that is designed to get buckets, right? They're going to allow him to go up and down and shoot reckless shots, and they're not going to win a lot of games, but he will put up a lot of points. And he's going to be a point guard in a free-flowing offense, shooting from mid-court game winners, as you mentioned, Webby. And again, how often have we seen the Rookie of the Year just be a guy on a bad team that can take whatever shot he wants? So if you're going to give me the low-budget Steph Curry, Rookie Year Steph Curry in the Atlanta Hawks, let's go. I'm with Future and Migos cheering for
nice.
Cheering
walking
for the Hawks
like you're talking.
Let's go, Trey Burke.
All right, if you're going off brand Steph Curry, I'm going off brand Dirk Nowitzki.
Let's go, right? Again, with all these awards too, people, if you disagree with us, let us know. Just hit us up in the comments of wherever you listen to this podcast, or add us on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. Next topic, Webby. Who will win MVP?
Are you going to start with me?
Yeah.
LeBron James.
Ooh, LeBron James.
I think I said this last year, too.
We both picked. That's funny you mentioned that because I was trying to think back, and yes, I think we both picked LeBron James last year, and I don't think we were that far.
No,
off.
he finished second in voting, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go with LeBron again this year because I think that the LA Lakers are going to increase their win total by enough and be maybe not a super high seed, but as Russell Westbrook showed us a couple years ago, you don't necessarily need to be a number one seed to be an MVP. And I think that the other guys who are kind of in contention, when you look at Giannis or Antetokounmpo or Harden for sure, but I think Harden might be splitting votes with, maybe even Chris Paul if they're that good. But if the Lakers are a 50-win team, I think that LeBron will win another MVP.
It's super interesting, too, because you mentioned Harden, and I think there might be a reluctance to give it to James Harden 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's just a thing that happens, right? Like, I feel like he'd have to dominate so much again for people to give him the MVP 2 years in a row because people are always searching for storylines. And I think you're right in the sense that LeBron would give a storyline. LeBron in LA, that's definitely a storyline. And it's funny, if you go back and listen to last year's podcast when we were picking why LeBron would be MVP, we did say one of the main reasons would be because LeBron is going to go out banging because it might be his last year in Cleveland. And here we are, 1 year later.
And you know what? He's
going
to come out banging because it's his first year in LA. And if he wants to win over those Kobe stands like we've been talking about, he's got to come out and show out. And it's LeBron James. I'm pretty confident that he can do that.
Were you surprised by how they were going hard at each other last night? That game against the Warriors,
I didn't see it.
Lakers Warriors. It was highly contested. LeBron played 18 minutes or something like that, and it had 15 and 10 or something. He was going hard, and one layups and flexing the muscles, hitting he hit one half court three and stood there, struck a pose. Lance is beside him, getting being his hype man.
Listen,
there's so much going on. I'm like, whoa, okay. They're ready.
I did see the was it LeBron who threw the who did
alley-oop to Lonzo?
No, the long snap to Rondo.
Yes.
Yeah. That was weird to see, considering all the history that Garnett and Rondo had against LeBron. Seeing him do that with Rondo, that was pretty weird. That was pretty weird.
You're also correct in the sense that there'll be a lot of stats out there for the Lakers because I feel like the Lakers are just going to try to run people out of the gym because they won't be able to play defense. And they got these super athletes where you're looking at the five being played by either JaVale McGee or LeBron or Kuzma.
Yeah.
Right? So
if
that's your team.
And this team looks built to run, too.
Exactly. As you mentioned LeBron, I wanted to mention this headline that I saw just because of how crazy it was. But the headline says, at one point, LeBron James considered signing with the Raptors last summer.
Jesus.
Did you see this?
No.
I was surprised this didn't even get much pub, but Joe Varden of The Athletic was on Yahoo Sports Podcast, and he said, I think at one point Toronto was kind of a dark horse there. I think there was some sniffing around on both ends.
Oh, that would have been crazy.
Right? That's so crazy, crazy, crazy. But, obviously that didn't happen. But the fact that that's even a thing is a credit to Masai.
Yeah, absolutely. He's known throughout the league for being that guy.
Being that dude, exactly. Which leads us to who my MVP pick is, and it's Kawhi Leonard.
Wow.
And here's the thing. Kawhi Leonard, I think, can win MVP, and it's based around the fact that last year the Toronto Raptors won 59 games without Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. Now you add those two players, and if they're healthy with this offense, them fully buying into this offense, and the next wave of what this offense will be the splitting up of JV and Serge, right? But also the running of the offense through the five and having just, Kawhi will be able to get easy buckets, right? He's not going to be having to grind out one-on-one, ISO ball to get his buckets. There'll be easy buckets made just from the style of offense. He shoots better threes in that DeMar DeRozan slot, and the bigger thing is he just has a name, right?
Yeah.
So now, if the Raptors winning 59 games and DeMar DeRozan doesn't have that name, he can't even get a sniff into the MVP talk, right? But now you add in Kawhi Leonard. And if Kawhi Leonard averaged DeMar DeRozan's numbers last year, which we know that Kawhi can average better than that, but if he does that and the Raptors win 60-plus games and our first in the East, Kawhi is going to get serious consideration for MVP, and in the storyline angle of it, I could see Kawhi winning MVP this year.
Oh, wow. I could see, if you're betting, I think that Kawhi probably has some really, really smart odds. I'm sure he's not in the top 5. You could probably get him at a good price. And that's really smart. I mean, you got to think, too, if you look at the East, again, no LeBron playing in this conference anymore. Look at a team like Boston. That's a good team, but they don't have one guy. I mean, they have a couple of guys. Yeah. You look at the Sixers, it's the same thing. Like, sure, maybe Embiid could have an insane year, but you figure if Embiid is having a good year, Simmons is having a good year too. And just like I said about Paul and Harden maybe splitting some votes, could happen in Philly. Let's hope that happens in Philly. But yeah, I mean, if the Raptors are a number 1 seed, the only thing is that I would say that kind of backs up my pick with LeBron is that team doesn't have as far to go. Like, you know what I mean? Like the Raptors, like you said, they won. I know what you mean. They won 59 without Kawhi. How much better can they be with Kawhi? But if he puts up crazy numbers and the defensive stats are there and they're number 1 seed, I could easily see it happening. That's an awesome pick.
And I'm just seeing people buying into narratives, right? And again, I'm not even saying Kawhi has to average like that crazy numbers. I'm saying that if Kawhi averages DeMar's numbers from last year because of the name, but adding in the storyline of, the Raptors going out on a limb to get Kawhi Leonard and Kawhi Leonard coming back off of an injury and now you add that mystique to a Raptors team winning 60 games, which they almost did last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did this year. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying you add in the storyline. What do we know about writers? Obviously, they love narratives. Yeah. They love storylines, right? So, yeah, my pick for MVP is Kawhi Leonard.
The only thing that can make this point moot is if Anthony Davis comes out and averages 32, 15, 5, and 6. It's like
true.
Or Giannis comes out and averages almost a triple-double. Like, that could make our narrative point a little moot. But I agree with you that those writers like to award the story. It's why Russell Westbrook won in averaging a triple-double the other year, right?
For sure. Totally. Let's lighten things up a little bit here. And I'm going to let you pick first, Webby. But who will win the Feed Me MVP? If you follow the show, you know that Feed Me is our social media segment, right? Where we talk about the most interesting things that come across our social media feeds or timelines, right? So who will be the Feed Me MVP and dominate social media this year? Mr. Andrew Webster.
Well, the New York Knicks aren't going to win many games this year. Okay. We know that. But I'll tell you who wins on social media. All of us. Because Enes Kanter is an absolute gem when it comes to his pettiness and his humor on Instagram and Twitter. And I think that like I say, it's going to be a very, very long season in New York. And Enes is not one who shies away from a challenge, whether it comes from the dictator of his homeland in Turkey, Erdogan, or LeBron James. And so I'm expecting a lot of emojis from our friend Enes. Every time they get beat down and some fans start to get on him, I'm sure he's going to clap back on Twitter. I can't wait. I can't wait. And maybe even gets Jesus and Mero involved too. That's what I'm hoping. I know there's shows coming back on Showtime sometime, but they need to have Enes Kanter on.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all, Webby. I like that. I like that, actually. I went in a different direction, though. And I went in the direction of one man and one man only. This is the same man that had the grad quote that read, his high school grad quote read, "Get girls or die trying."
Oh.
That is one J.R. Smith, okay? The reason why I'm picking J.R. Smith is because we're talking about a guy who last year made headlines because he got suspended for throwing soup on his coach, okay?
What was it, chicken tortilla soup?
Something like that. Something like that, I think. But in the offseason, we've already seen J.R. Smith at Cleveland Browns games taking his shirt off in the crowd for some unexplained reason just because he's J.R. Smith. We've seen J.R. Smith already make headlines because the NBA has warned him that he needs to cover up his Supreme tattoo that he got across his calf.
Yes.
So that, or he might face fines if he leaves it exposed. And the season hasn't even started yet. But most importantly, one LeBron James isn't here to steal his shine. So I'm going with J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith will be the Feed Me MVP just because it's J.R.'s time to shine, man. Let's go.
It's like with no LeBron there in Cleveland, it's like taking off a restrictor plate on a race car.
Right?
It's just like you're going to get the full J.R. Smith experience.
It's like every time I try to explain to someone why the NBA is the best and like why it's so much fun, I just think of this guy got suspended because he threw soup at an assistant coach, and we know about it, right? Like, I'm sure fucked up shit like that happens in other sports. Like, I'm sure, right? But that stuff just doesn't get out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's disagreements and like fucked up shit that happens in other sports.
Yeah.
But like J.R. Smith's a guy who's been suspended for or paid fines for untying people's shoes at the free throw line, for taking pictures of his girlfriends or Instagram models in thongs in his bed and just posting it for some strange reason.
Who wants the pipe?
Who wants the pipe? J.R. Smith has been suspended for and has received fine for so many things that I can't wait to see what's going to happen when LeBron's not there to, I don't want to say keep him in check, but at least have him down gear a couple times. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that's going to be fun. Can't wait for that. The next kind of fun award here, Webby, is who's going to be your league pass team this year?
Okay, so I'm guessing we've got to do away with the Lakers.
Well, I'm going to cheat here a little bit. And I know that the Lakers shouldn't count, but I'm not really picking the Lakers. I'm picking the Lakers bench of Lance, JaVale, Rondo, LeVar Ball. Like, forget about LeBron. We know LeBron's awesome. I think Ingram's going to be great. Kuzma's going to be great. But I'm here to watch Lance and JaVale McGee ball out on the Lakers. That's what I want to see. That's why I'm here on League Pass. I'll be tuning into every single Lakers game because what is Lance going to do? What is LeVar going to do? LeVar's been crazy quiet. Can that really last for the whole season? I don't know, but I'm here to find out and follow the Lakers night after night and see what they're up to. That's my League Pass team, even though I know that's a cheat, but I'm going with the Lakers bench.
If we're going strictly by playing, I would probably say, I don't know. I'd probably say Dallas. Like, I know, you know that I like my doughy Lithuanian Doncic. I think he's going to be fun to watch. But in terms of actual drama, what we want to see out there, we've been talking about him in this podcast already. Tell me you're not going to want to tune into Minnesota Timberwolves game. Are you kidding me? Especially if they keep Jimmy Butler. This is what we want to see. Every night there's going to be a chance that Jimmy Butler takes a swing at either Towns, Wiggins, or both.
It's going to be so fun.
Are you kidding me? I'm definitely going to be tuning into their games. Faux show.
One last NBA prediction. Who will win the NBA Finals? Now, is it just a foregone conclusion it's the Warriors? Yeah? Because my Warriors ban is going into effect, right? For those unfamiliar, I've told people at the start of last season that you will enjoy the NBA season a lot more if you don't pay attention to the Golden State Warriors. And what I mean by that is they're just going to dummy teams. They don't care about the regular season. Most of the time when they lose, it's because they decided they were going to lose before the game started and they don't care. They have players coaching in the middle of certain games where Steve Kerr's just chilling. I do not pay attention to the Golden State Warriors during the regular season unless they're playing like four teams, like the Raps,
when they're
Rockets,
playing on
Thunder.
when they're playing Thursday nights, or they're playing
like
a national game. Then I'll pay attention. But you're right. I'm not going to be watching. I'm not going to be watching their home broadcasts or anything.
No, I'm not watching. I'm not here for like Warriors Kings. Like miss me with that stuff, right?
I honestly, I'd rather watch the Kings play, the Heat or something than watch the. I agree with you there, but unfortunately, Shelley, I do believe that
they will win again.
Yeah, as Ric Flair says, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and so, I'd like to say that if the Raptors got in the finals, they might have a chance. If Boston gets in there, they might have a chance, or if the Sixers get in there, they might have a chance. But to be honest, you and I both know that's not true.
So
but
then let's make it a more interesting conversation then. Who will the Warriors be facing in the NBA Finals?
No.
Who, Mr. Andrew Webster, will win the East?
Okay.
Who will win? Not
who's
who do
going
you want
to win? Who's going to win or who will win? Because as much as this sucks, who's going to win is the Boston Celtics.
Okay.
Not only did they getting Gordon Hayward back this year. Whatever you think about Gordon Hayward as a basketball player and where he stands, as where he ranks in the league or whatever, he's a good basketball player. And the gruesome injury he suffered last year was something that nobody wants to see. But honestly, getting him back is like trading for Gordon Hayward. Yeah. It's like the Sixers thing of getting first-round picks, a year after they play. It's like getting a trade of this guy coming to your team and not losing anything. Not only that, but as we've mentioned many a time on this podcast, Brad Stevens is an NBA coaching genius.
Yeah.
Getting him ready for this season, I just don't see how the Celtics don't make the finals this year unless, A, there's injuries, and with Kyrie Irving, there's always a chance. Very rarely does he ever make it through a full season without something happening to the knee, the leg. I know that he's got infection problems there. And then the other thing is if Kawhi plays his balls off. And the Raptors really do improve on a 59-win season with one of the better players in the NBA on their team. Or if, Embiid and Simmons make the complete leap to superstardom. But coming into the first game of the season on Tuesday, I look at Boston, and I just don't see how it doesn't result in an NBA Finals appearance for them.
So this is the thing, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am not doing this as being a homer, but I'm saying that the Toronto Raptors are making the NBA Finals.
Ooh.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because the Toronto Raptors were already a good team. Some would argue that the Toronto Raptors were already built in years past to get to the NBA Finals. They just didn't have the top tier talent to get over to match up well enough against other teams' best players. Now with Kawhi Leonard, you're going into most series where you can say that you have the best player in the series. Add that to having a deep team, that's where the depth of your team matters, right? Your depth didn't really matter if your top two isn't that good. Do you understand what I'm saying? Follow me for a second here, right?
I do, yeah.
The other thing to remember here is that you're replacing Kawhi Leonard, and obviously, yes, this is hinging on a healthy Kawhi Leonard, but you're replacing Kawhi Leonard into a rotation to which we told you here on the Ball on Blast podcast, right? Every year, DeMar DeRozan's numbers went up in the regular season. And you know what? Every year in the playoffs, his numbers went down. And he averaged less than he averaged in the regular season. You're now subbing that out for a finals MVP in Kawhi Leonard. He's not scared. He's not worried of the moment. He's not shy of the moment. He's ready to go. And then add in Danny Green, who also gives you more playoff experience and veteran experience. You're also hearing things where Danny Green's talking about he hasn't seen Kawhi this engaged and this vocal in huddles, in timeouts, in practices. I know I might be sipping the Kool-Aid of what's going on in the preseason, but to make picks about the NBA Finals, this is what you kind of got to do. And so it's not even just that, but I also have too many issues with the Boston Celtics. Namely, I don't think there's enough minutes to go around for everybody, and I could see that becoming a problem for that team. I just don't know how you can go from relying on Jaylen Brown and Tatum that much to now telling them, okay, you guys got to take a step back. Also, too, that I find very important, look it up. Kyrie Irving has had more seasons where he's been injured than seasons that he's been healthy. So how am I to believe that and just assume that Kyrie Irving's going to be healthy when history tells me that he's injured more than he's healthy? I'm just saying there's question marks around the Boston Celtics. There's question marks about will all these pieces fit? And I'm willing to bet on the Raptors more than that. So I'm saying the Toronto Raptors will be your Eastern Conference champion.
I see what you're saying, and I see a lot of similarities between the two teams.
For sure.
Of being very deep, of having multiple guys who can score, multiple guys who can do a lot for you. My only thing is that it comes down to the coaching. And if you're giving me a choice between Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, I'm sure Nick Nurse is going to be a great coach, but a guy in his first year, I don't see him getting the better of a team that's coached by Brad Stevens, especially in a 7-game series. If it does come down to the Raptors and the Celtics in the NBA final or in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now,
you know what?
Who knows?
I'll give you that. That's totally true. The coaching advantage definitely goes to the Boston Celtics, right? Definitely. I'll give you that.
And who knows? Maybe it'll be Brett Brown against Nick Nurse in the Eastern Conference Finals. And even then, I'd like Brett Brown, even though he didn't coach that well last year in the playoffs.
Hey, either way, we'll find out soon enough. As mentioned, next Friday, we'll get a first taste of it, right? Toronto Raptors will take on the Boston Celtics. So we'll see how the two teams match up super early, and everyone's healthy so far. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But again, people, hit us up wherever you listen to the podcast or hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you think. Who will be in the Eastern Conference Finals representing the Eastern Conference? We definitely want to hear from you. And we're on Twitter interacting with fans too and talking back about what's going on. So we want to have that conversation. The conversation exists far beyond just this podcast alone.
Yeah,
right?
Listen, and on Tuesday, I'm planning on staying up late all night and watching basketball. I don't care how I feel at work the next day. If you are up watching basketball, hit me up, hit Shelly up on Twitter. We'd love to talk to you guys as these games are going on and seeing if you're seeing the same things we are.
Totally. So as always, too, we know that it's not only just basketball that we do on this podcast. We always have an Ask on Blast segment. And in said Ask on Blast segment, we take a question from the viewers, from the listeners, from a fan. And normally it's outside the game of basketball and it dabbles into a little pop culture.
Nice.
And this week we got a question from Richard. And Richard wants to know, did you guys catch the Chance the Rapper interview on the Joe Budden podcast? And if so, what did you think? Webby, pointing to you.
Well, I didn't originally, but you sent me the clips last night, told me to take a watch. Now, like, my podcast queue is already longer than super full. And I'm not the biggest Joe Budden guy either.
That's fair.
But I do like Chance. And I think he's a really interesting guy, a good artist. I love all of his music. So I was down to watch these clips. First one I watched was about the Kanye thing, and I thought that, it's funny. I thought that Chance said a lot without saying much.
Exactly.
Yes. And Budden for honestly, man, and I got to give Joe Budden his credit where it's due. I thought that he did a really good job interviewing because he wasn't letting Chance get away with anything, especially when it came to Kanye. When he was when he was talking about the actual music that he puts out, what have you, tell me what his best albums are. And then Chance had his first two, and he's like, see, he made trash after that. He held Chance's feet up to the fire. Now,
for sure. I thought it too. It was super cool. It might not have been in one of the clips that you saw, but later on they also talked about the fact that Chance was explaining how he did a bunch of work on Ye as well, but it never made the album.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could tell that exactly what you're saying, where you could see Chance was saying a lot more than the words that were actually coming out of his mouth.
Right.
But that makes sense. Exactly what you were saying. You could tell that he was kind of salty about it.
Yeah.
Right? That he was kind of like, wait, I came out, we did all these tracks, and the way that he worded it too, right? Because Joe Budden phrased it in terms of, oh, so you had a verse that they didn't use, and he's like, no, I wrote stuff for that.
He said that he said that about Pablo too, and how it was a dark record, and he was like, it was supposed to be way lighter, but they took out everything that I wrote.
Well, he said that he said at that time he was working on a lot of gospel stuff, and then that's where you get the ultralight beam from. That's where you're getting waves from. And it's funny because when you hear those songs, he's like, Joe Budden said it too. It's exactly what you're saying. He was super honest. He was like, oh, the songs that we like on
the
Pablo.
best songs on the album, exactly.
So I found that super interesting.
Now the other part that I saw was about the independent artist thing.
Yes.
Now this I want to get into it because I'm sure you think opposite. I sided with Joe Budden on this.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation.
As much as I love Chance the Rapper and I love what he does for the community of Chicago, I love his positivity. I really honestly, he's one of my favorite artists going right now. Everything that he does, I will listen to. I'm still waiting for that actual song that he put out on Instagram with him and Future. It's like the best song that I've heard in the last 5 years. And it's not actually out. It's called My Peak. So if you go to YouTube and type in My Peak, Chance the Rapper and Future, it'll come up. It's 2 Instagram videos together, and it's so fucking good. But I love Chance. So I preface what I'm going to say with that. Joe Budden's absolutely right. Chance the Rapper's not an independent artist. And him saying that he is and wearing that badge, Chance even said, it's not like I'm going around wearing that badge of an independent artist.
And Joe's like, you are.
He is, and for all of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of true independent artists, whether it's music, movies, art, whatever, it takes away from what they do and the sacrifice they put out there. I understand Chance owns all his own music and all his own publication and all his own rights. That's awesome, and that's good for him. But what he got from Apple was not quite, like he said, not quite what Drake got.
Yeah.
But that's not what an independent artist does.
Yeah, it was super interesting, right? And you could tell there was a layer of semantics. Do you know what I mean? Because what Chance was talking about was, hey, you can just call up Apple, and what was the term they were using? Tick.
Yeah, tick.
Like if you basically have the hype around you, they'll listen to you, and it's like, well, that's kind of different than an independent artist. And I thought the beauty of the conversation between Joe Budden and Chance, like them going back and forth about being independent and what independence means, you're bang on, right? What Apple Music did is basically play the role of a label, right? And I think Chance, like the beauty of the conversation was that they both were on different sides, but they both like acknowledge the other one being right at certain points. Because at one point Chance was like, well, I guess I wasn't independent for that 3 weeks or whatever the length was that it was exclusive to Apple, right? So like he does have an understanding of where Joe Budden's coming from, the exact same way that Joe Budden had the understanding that, hey, at the end of the day, I appreciate what you did and I rep what you did because I want more people, right? Like more artists, more creators to take that chance on their own and find different ways to X out the middleman, which is a label. So I thought that was really cool. That's what made it a cool conversation. You had two people listening to each other who disagreed with each other, but were able to have a good dialogue. I thought that was really cool. And again, the reason I love Chance that he like completely disavowed Kanye. Like he was just openly saying like, oh no, I do not rep him with the hat. And I told him, he's like, I told him that. Like, oh no, we had that conversation. I told him why he shouldn't wear the hat. And like, you could tell that he was being honest and just being real, right? And that was super cool. I thought that was amazing. I also thought, as you said, him being honest about the music being bad. And it makes me wonder too, like, I like that you could really tell that he was mad that, hold on, I came out and worked with you on this Ye album and you scrapped what I did. Like, I like that he was mad at that because there's got to be a level of, you working with one person and you working with your boy. And you feel like him and Chance should be at that level where almost like him and Cudi are at, where everything that Cudi does basically ends up making it, right? So it was interesting in that sense. But a dope interview. And overall, I know a lot of people are kind of on the fence on Joe Budden. And the reason why I love Joe Budden's podcast so much is because, one, they're just having casual conversations as friends, but two, he does a lot of talking about creating and trying to give back to content creators and musicians, and does a lot of talk about industry and how the industry works, right? And drops a lot of knowledge about where he kind of ran into trouble with the industry. You know what I mean? And kind of giving little tidbits about how to work through the game, so to speak, right? And figure out ways to cut out the middleman and to empower the creators, right? Because at the end of the day, none of this business, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, podcasts or music or TV or whatever, none of this works without the creators, right? And so once you know that and you're empowered by that, you should be empowered by that. And that's a reminder that he's always dropping. That's why I rep the Joe Budden podcast, and, you should add it. Find a way to add it to
I'll
the
tell you,
rotation
it was
somehow.
my favorite part of it was when he got up and started walking away from the couch. And
Yes,
Chance was
yes.
he's like, oh, I'm going to call up Migos now.
Yes, so
He's like,
good. And I also just love the fact that Chance was like, "Oh no, I watch you
Yeah.
guys. Like, like you guys are the culture. Like you guys are talking about stuff in the culture that we want to talk about, we want to hear about, and how many places are you going to go for that, right?" And I think that's the beauty of the internet. Whatever it is that you're into, the people decide what is right or wrong. Joe Budden could go to some TV station somewhere or BET or whatever, and they're going to tell him no, 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 no. So what did he do? He did it on his own. Put it out there, and the people decide. That's the beauty of the internet in 2018. We focus on the negatives a lot, but one of the positives is that the people decide, not some gatekeeper that's not cool anyways, trying to decide what's cool and what cool people want to listen to and rock with. Is decided by some gatekeeper that's not cool.
We got to stop this conversation before it hits too close to home, Shelly.
No comments. No comments. Well, Webby, on that note, where should the people hit you?
Listen, you can find me.
That's great. I'm so glad you said that.
I saw where it was going.
But
everybody, listen. Basketball is starting. Like, this is the best time to hit me up on Twitter. That's usually where I'm at when I'm watching these games. At AWebster84. Like, let's have some fun. Let's watch these games. Figure out what's going on. Hit me up. I can't wait for Tuesday. Celtics, Sixers. I got my MF Fultz shirt right here, ready to go. I'm repping. I'm fired up. I cannot wait.
Webby, I'm right there with you. And the second half of that back-to-back is OKC.
LA.
And, the Warriors,
I thought it was
right?
LA.
I think it's OKC and the Warriors.
We got to
Pretty
make sure that Russ is going to
But
play in that game.
either way, the NBA is finally here, and we're here too. As Webby mentioned, hit him up for sure. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Shell Alexander or on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And shout out to the people that are liking and watching the videos on YouTube and on Facebook. Shout out to you. Continue to like it and subscribe and comment there with anything that you might have that you want us to hear that we'll talk about on the podcast. And of course, shout out to the people following and liking and subscribing on iTunes and the day one listeners on SoundCloud. Greatly appreciate you guys. We wouldn't still be doing it without y'all, guys and girls, of course, not discriminating.
Never.
But we appreciate you. And now that basketball's here, I'm fired up. Can't wait till next week. And as a wise man once said, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Ball on Blast podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next week, see ya.
Peace.
This is Ball on Blast, part of the On Blast Podcast Network, available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you like it, then subscribe and tell your friends. Holla.